Welcome to the House of Hypertrophy. Can you maximize muscle growth with just one set? I'm glad to say we have a new study adding to the literature on how training with single versus multiple sets impacts hypertrophy. We'll review this paper, and then we'll crucially detail how this study fits into the overall science of sets for hypertrophy. Let's dive in. 15 untrained men trained the unilateral pec deck twice per week for 12 weeks. With one arm, they performed one set per session, thereby totaling 2 weekly sets. With their other arm, they performed 3 sets per session, thereby totaling 6 weekly sets. These were the rep ranges they trained with across the weeks, and all sets were taken to volitional concentric failure. Before and after the study, muscle thickness of both the clavicular and sternocostal heads of the pectoralis major was measured. This was great, as it technically gives us insight into how the pec deck may grow different pec regions. Ultimately, it was found that both conditions similarly grew the 2 regions of the pectoralis major. Also, the clavicular head actually grew similarly to the sternocostal head. I'll discuss these regional findings towards the end of the video. So this paper, which had several good things going for it, found doing triple the number of sets failed to produce greater gains. Based on previous videos at the House of Hypertrophy, you might have been expecting the 3 sets to comfortably produce more growth. This study was done on untrained individuals, but there are still numerous examples of untrained individuals growing more from multiple sets versus a single set. Some may say this is yet again an example of science flip-flopping, and that you can find any study to support anything, thus rendering science useless. However, these notions stem from a misunderstanding of science. These findings are actually completely compatible with 3 sets really being superior to 1 set. I'm fully aware that may sound like an insane thing to say, but I can demonstrate why. Before that, I should emphasize I am not saying low set numbers are bad. It's clear they can absolutely stimulate hypertrophy, even in trained individuals, so can be excellent if you're short on training time. With this new study, we could analyze the methods. We could wonder whether a greater contrast between the low and high sets, a longer duration, or other factors might yield different results. We do this often at the House of Hypertrophy. Unsurprisingly, it can be a valid way to figure out why studies arrive at different conclusions. But there is an alternative explanation that deserves more attention. It can tell us why even with perfect and identical methods, we can get studies that seem to conflict. In fact, it's something we should expect. Understanding this can reshape how you view single studies. Of course, whenever we run a study, we're trying to figure out at the population level what training method builds the most muscle. For example, in the billions of untrained people between 18 to 35 years old, or in the millions of trained people between 18 to 35 years old, how does 1 set compare to 3 sets on average? We can't run a study on millions or billions of people, so we take samples from our population hoping our results reflect the true population effects. But we always risk obtaining a sample that fails to reflect the overall population by chance. This is especially true with small sample sizes, which are common in the exercise science literature. A simple example conveys this. Let's say we have a fair coin. It's quite possible, purely by chance, that all 3 flips land on heads, which may lead us to incorrectly conclude that the coin is biased towards heads. But as we flip it more times, we get closer to reality. There are many possible sources of error. In the case where we have subjects train one limb with 1 set and the other limb with 3 sets, although there are advantages to this design, there are still considerations. Perhaps some had one limb notably smaller to begin with, giving it greater growth potential. Perhaps some were doing things outside the study that impaired the stimulus to one limb over the other. There's also measurement error which, by chance, could influence one limb more than the other. Finally, a proportion of individuals may genuinely experience similar growth between 1 and 3 sets in certain cases, but they may be the exception. We'll discuss individual differences near the end. Again, I can't emphasize enough how these things are more likely to be problematic with small samples. We can use simulations to make this point strikingly clear. Credit goes to James Krieger, who ran the following simulation. His article is linked in the description. This is based on comparing different groups of people, but it gets the overall point across. Let us make our population with 3 million trained individuals. We're going to say that over a given period, high volumes increase biceps thickness by 3 mm, moderate volumes by 2 mm, and low volumes by 1 mm. Of course, not every single person grows identically. So let's say each volume condition has a standard deviation of 2 mm. Since we've made all this up, we know for a fact these are the true population effects. But what happens if we simulate 5 studies comparing low, moderate and high volumes with 10 subjects per group? Using statistical software to simulate this, these were the 5 study results Krieger obtained. The studies vary notably. Only study 1 shows us something that resembles the true population effects. The rest show different patterns. There are instances of a plateau at moderate volumes, high volumes being numerically worse than moderate volumes, and moderate volumes being numerically worse than lower volumes. Looking at this, you may be tempted to conclude science is worthless, but larger sample sizes can help overcome this. We can also absolutely make use of small sample size research by combining them into a meta-analysis, which gives us greater statistical power and likely a more accurate insight. Indeed, Krieger combined the results of the 5 papers into a meta-analysis, and we can see it's pretty close to the true population effects. So mixed results are to be expected. This is why at the House of Hypertrophy, whenever we're overviewing a single study, we always try to detail the broader literature in an attempt to get closer to the truth. Each study is ultimately a single data point belonging to a future meta-analysis. At this point you may be wondering, do we have any meta-analyses on sets and hypertrophy? Regular viewers will know the answer is yes. Here is the latest meta-analysis, specifically a meta-regression. More sets tend to cause more hypertrophy, with diminishing returns. Note that the x-axis is the number of sets performed per muscle group per week. There are crucial considerations that mean this analysis does not necessarily prove seriously high volumes are the best, and I'd like to emphasize again how lower volumes can still deliver some gains. For the details behind this, check out this recent video where we analyze how many sets you may wish to perform, as well as how often you may wish to train a muscle. Everything discussed so far has been centered around finding the average effects in a population, but what about individual differences? We have papers potentially suggesting individual differences. For example, this paper had subjects train unilateral leg extensions and leg presses thrice per week for 12 weeks. One leg performed 1 set per exercise, while the other leg performed 3 sets per exercise. A proportion saw greater gains with 3 sets, some similar gains, and a smaller number saw greater gains with 1 set. Yet, this data may not necessarily prove individual differences due to some points noted earlier, which are even more relevant when interpreting the results of one person. Unfortunately, the study designs necessary to demonstrate true individual differences haven't been done in the muscle growth literature, so nothing conclusive can be said. I will say my best guess is that individual differences exist. Physiological mechanisms could be in play, but also lifestyle factors. If you're going through a stressful period in your life, your response to higher volumes of training may be impaired. Currently, I think the best bet is to use the average effects in the literature as a starting point. It remains possible that they are generalizable to most people, but it's not a definitive training prescription. You can adjust things where you feel it's appropriate. For example, if you're performing a high number of sets and feel under-recovered, you can experiment with lower sets. Conversely, if you've been stalled for months but are recovering well, it could be worth experimenting with additional sets. Before wrapping up, let's return to the latest paper, which besides its volume findings also suggests the pec deck intriguingly grew the clavicular and sternocostal head similarly. Many might have anticipated the clavicular head to not grow as well as it did. However, it is worth noting they just measured a single point at both regions. It's possible to split up the pecs into a greater number of regions, so how these regions grew is uncertain. And of course, as has been the focus of this video, this is just one paper, so it's not definitive proof pec decks are enough for maximizing upper pec growth. We unfortunately have minimal research exploring regional pec growth, but I'm excited to see how the research progresses in this area. All in all, as outlined in our ultimate guide to developing the chest, I still think it's worth having an exercise that potentially biases the upper pecs, such as an incline press. If you're looking for an exceedingly effective customized muscle building program, our exceptionally rated partner, the Alpha Progression app, can help you. No other app gets close to creating personalized programs as comprehensive and well-rounded. Input key details, such as what equipment you have, if you want to emphasize some muscles more than others, and how often and how long you're able to train for. This generally takes less than a minute. The training philosophy is based on the latest scientific literature. Track each set with the app, and the app also provides progressive overload recommendations to assist you. And there's a nice workout summary at the end. Of course, the app automatically logs and displays your progression across time. If you're unsure about exercise technique, There are straightforward video and text instructions on over 600 exercises. The reviews from tens of thousands is a testament to its exceptional quality, but we would love to know what you think. The link in the comments and description gives you a free 2-week trial plus 20% off a subscription if you do continue. Thank you for making it to the end. Feel free to check out another one of the videos at the House of Hypertrophy.